לפניי, אלוקי אבותינו, לאמותינו, שתולידנו לשלום, ותעתידנו לשלום, ותדריכנו לשלום, ותשמחנו לשלום, ותגיענו למחוז חפצנו לחיים, ולשמחה ולשלום, ותצילנו מכף כל אויב ועורב, וליסים וחיות רעות אדוני אלוהינו, יהי רצון מלפנייך, אלוהי אבותינו ואימותינו.
לכל אמת יש גם חולשה, לכל מפל ישנה תקומה, לכל כאב יש הצלחה, ובכל לב יש אהבה.
Hey, well the king I'ma crown you, and I'm just so happy I found you. So you give me air when I'm drowning, your presence I feel is astounding, and it breaks my heart to let go, so I just figure I won't. I'd rather keep holding you close, you know I'm here holding you strong. I'm sitting there gripping your throne.
בא אליך שלם כמו כוכב
wonders. You pulled me up, took me from under. You turned on my winters to summer. And I can't understand why you love me. I only see that I mess up things, but somehow you bring me to comfort and take away all of my struggles.
יש גם פרידה, לכל במה יש מדרגה, לכל יסוד יש הוויה, ובכל שיר יש נשמה.
I was trying to be free, but I felt locked down. I was trying to be me, but I can't find how. You are my compass, directing me closer, crying my eyes out, getting to know you. I'm your beloved, so hug me, I'm running to you. Your majesty grab me, I'm ready to move. Together we scream.
You are my king, אתה הוא המלך, מראה לי את הדרך. אתה הוא מקים, אך זה נשמתי. אתה הוא המלך, מראה לי את הדרך. אתה תקוותי, תקשיב לליבי. אך זה נשמתי, אתה הוא המלך, הראה לי את הדרך, אתה תקוותי, תקשיב לליבי.
We'll be coming back at around a few minutes after 10 to allow everyone to access the program. Enjoy the music. Jeffrey Geisner is here from the Jewish Culture and Holocaust Remembrance Group.
For 7 decades in my car, been driving while I look afar.
How past to present swiftly turns,
And how my soul inside still yearns.
above Masada comes the sun. Prayer to Jerusalem shall run.
From the Kinneret and Aksiv to celebrating Tel Aviv.
My father wished upon a well that we all meet in Israel. And now my child is asking me how this land has come to be.
This is home, this is heart. We will never be apart.
Our parents are the roots.
We the flowers, we are music, note by note. Shevet Achim v'Achayot. The same old street, same neighborhood.
12 sons of Jacob on the route.
Together wandering around.
In search of what will soon be found.
A man reflects his homeland's view, engraving lines of old and new.
Between the promises and prayers, a scent of oranges and pears.
And in my mother's eyes I see a place that's always right for me.
On the guitar somebody plays.
An ancient song to guide my way.
This is home, this is heart. We will never be apart. Our parents are the roots. We the flowers, we are music, note by note. Shevet Achim v'Achayot.
From the beginning, all is stitched. Piece by piece, the story's built. Two words connect and meaning made.
With the poet's golden thread.
We now belong, we're family. To all my friends, I say, I feel.
With every heartbeat in my chest.
I'm from the east, I'm from the west.
כאן זה בית, כאן זה לב, ואותך אני לא עוזב. אבותינו שורשים, ואנחנו הפרחים, המנגינות.
שבט אחים ואחיות,
שבט אחים ואחיות.
Good morning, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Welcome to the Jewish Culture and Holocaust Remembrance Group's Zoom event from generation to generation. And I'm so delighted and honored to have so many of you with us today, friends, new friends, and I hope you're going to have a really enjoyable program with us for the next few hours. I want to start by just going over a little tech check so all of you know how to deal with some stuff. Obviously, we're on the internet, so if you get bumped off or you lose your connection, I'm admitting people all throughout the program. So all you have to do is click the link you came in on and I'll readmit you. I also want to make sure that you can put your cameras on so our speakers can actually see you just like if you were presenting in a live program. So I know many of you are off video at the moment, but I would argue that you should bring us closer as a community and go and get on camera. So it's great to see each of you popping in with photos. We have terrific presenters here today, starting with Joan Haar, Mirla Raz, and Marilyn Price, who will all be taking the presentation spots. I have some surprises for you as well. And we're going to get started. This is actually the fourth year, the beginning of the fourth year season for the Jewish Culture and Holocaust Remembrance Group. I started and founded the group in May of 2021, and it's been such an honor and really a blessing. I do this to honor my survivor parents, my mom and my dad, and each of you are really a part of this community and a part of my heart. I am admitting people as we speak. We should have a very large crowd. We have over 80 RSVPs. Don't know how many will actually come, but you can see the screens are filling up. I want to start by presenting a piece of music that I have for each of the successive seasons. And so I'm going to screen share, and we'll get started with programming.
Amen.
So this Friday is Rosh Hashanah, so L'Shana Tova to every one of you. Want to also call out the many survivors who always join us for our program. I see, raise your hand. Ruth Lindemann is in the screen there. I can see her. Sammy Steigman is with us. And if there are any other who I can't see, there's Devorah Caspi is on screen. I'm also asking you if you could put yourself on video, it would be helpful. So our presenters would be able to see you as if they were presenting to you in public. I want to also start the program with an announcement. I'm excited to let you know that the 2024 programming calendar is already full, if you can believe that. I have decided to create 18 more programs for us in the way of the Jewish Culture and Holocaust Remembrance International Film Festival. And so every month or every other month, I will be going into my catalog of films and reaching new producers and new directors who I have associated myself with. And I'm thrilled to announce that the first one is October 10th. That's a Wednesday. That's this coming October 10th. And we're going to be featuring a new film by a producer and director, Becky Talil, from California, called American Birthright. And again, I want to take a second and share my screen with you and present her trailer. And I hope you save the date. Join us. It's a Wednesday. It's at 12 o'clock Eastern time or 9 o'clock Pacific time, or check at the time zone wherever you are. We have an international audience. And I hope you will join us for what will be a very fun presentation. These will not only be Holocaust films, and if they are Holocaust films, I have led a group in San Diego. I'm now based in Philadelphia, but I founded the movie club for the second generation of the Shoah group in San Diego, and I promised that I would never, ever show concentration camp films. So they are memorable, educational, but certainly not films that will provide trauma. I'm not here to do any of that. And you can see by my programming, I try to keep things very uplifting. So I'm going to again share my screen while I'm intermitting people. So I'm doing two jobs, so just bear with me. And American Birthright is a feature-length documentary that follows an Israeli-American grapple with religion, love, and identity after her younger sister marries outside the faith. Becky Talil journeys to carve out her own identity as an Israeli immigrant in Los Angeles by consulting a handful of rabbis, religious experts, mentors, and families around her initial question, should I marry Jewish? What she finds changes her initial question to why be Jewish and shifts the very course of her life. American Birthright isn't a solely Jewish story. Becky gives an authentic voice to those struggling to fit in, find their purpose and identity, and own their individualism in a world that begs for assimilation. So let me begin.
My name is Becky. I'm an actress, writer, and filmmaker born in Israel but raised in the United States, where I've been faced with the challenge of understanding and maintaining my Jewish identity, and left wondering how that affects making decisions about love and relationships.
I guess I never really gave much thought to whether I truly needed or wanted to marry a Jew. I just kind of took my family's word for it's easier with a Jew.
Are you having an existential crisis?
I am.
Because of that J-Day commercial?
My bubby, she used to put seltzer in the matzo balls.
Yeah? Oh, well, that's your bubby. This is my bubby's recipe.
That commercial is so impactful. I imagine you with like a rabbi.
For 2 years, we've been like talking to a bunch of random people and asking opinions about like, is interfaith marriage cool?
A lot of people see it as this, you know, this great obstacle to overcome.
I don't think it's ideal to marry someone from your same religious background.
We have to look at the critical mass of Jews in this country and wonder how many more generations we have.
Everyone's giving us opinions and they're all saying different things, but also saying the same thing in different ways. So I'm realizing that like we're going all over the place talking to a bunch of people, and their opinions are emanations of their relationship to Torah. And so of course I'm still like lost 2 years later because I don't know my relationship to Torah.
I'm feeling very called to go back to study more and to just learn the things that I didn't learn after my bat mitzvah, you know, the stuff that I didn't feel was right for me at the time.
This whole project is heading in a different direction. I need to turn right and ask myself a bunch of questions by learning about like what is my truth, what is Jewish truth? Because until I know my relationship to Torah, I don't know what I want to say about interfaith marriage.
ולפי דעתי, עכשיו זה הזמן לעשות שינוי. אין מה לעשות. אין, את תמיד יכולה לחזור.
How do I start from step one? Like, how do I, as a Jew, educate myself about what Judaism is? Like, I need to treat myself like I'm converting.
Can you not tell from my smile that I fear nothing? No, I fear nothing. You can't hurt me, you can't hurt me, I'm strong.
You know, what'd be really cool is like, after all of this work, that we get to create something that shows people the sort of journey they've always wanted to go on. That's kind of what I'm after. I'd love to figure it out for myself, but I'd love to inspire some people to like actually engage and consciously create their lives.
I'm strong, I'm superwoman. I'm superwoman. I'm superwoman.
And you've watched the trailer for American Birthright. I'm sorry that Becky was supposed to be with us to introduce the film to us, but she's, as you see, she's young. She has a young family, and both of her children are sick. So she's being a great mom and staying with her kids. And she will be with us to introduce her film on October 10th, which is Wednesday on October 10th, where it will be the debut film for the International Film Festival for the Jewish Culture and Holocaust Remembrance Group. And I hope that you'll save the date and join us. The RSVP I'll be sharing with you in chat, so you'll be able to collect in. I'm now going to introduce our first speaker. And, oh, sorry, hold on one second. And that is Joan Gluckauf Haahr with her book, Prisoners of Memory, A Jewish Family from Nazi Germany. In her recently published book, Prisoners of Memory, A Jewish Family from Nazi Germany, Joan realized her lifelong ambition to uncover the details behind the bare statistics in the German archives and historical records about her Jewish family, both those who perished and those who survived the Nazi regime. The daughter of Jewish German refugees, she inherited more than 1,500 letters and hundreds of photographs that her mother, which supplemented by more than 20 years of research, became the basis of this intimate study of what happened to her family and world. So, Joan, just let me a second to tee up your presentation here. Let me share my screen again. And Joan, you're not muted, so you should be able to just, why don't you take the presentation and as
okay. All right. First of all, I want to welcome all of you, friends, family members. Thanks for attending. I start with this slide, because Prisoners of Memory is the primary title of my book. But I start with this slide, which is a picture of Hitler being welcomed, and not fully enthusiastically, in April of 1933 in the small town of my mother's birth, and where her family had lived for hundreds of years. I think many of you may know about the German Jewish attachment to Germany. It's a very ambivalent attachment, but I want to just begin by reading the very opening of my book, because it shows something of what I lived through, what I understood. This is chapter 1. A few days before her death, having spent the past 3 months in a Bronx nursing home, my mother suddenly blurted out, "I want to go home." "Home?" I asked. "Where is home?" "Zwingenberg," she said. "I want to go back to Zwingenberg," naming the small German village of her birth that she had left in 1930, 70 years earlier, and to which she returned only once for a brief final visit to her family in 1934. And can we go to slide 2 now?
Okay.
Yeah, this is Zwingenberg. This is a photo of Zwingenberg, somewhere taken, I would say, in the 1920s. It was a very picturesque, whoops.
Oops, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
My apologies.
Okay, so it was taken, it's much larger now. It's than it was then. It is the oldest village on the Bergstrasse. The Bergstrasse is a mountain road between Darmstadt and Heidelberg in the province of Hesse. And you can see this is the Obergasse, that is the upper street, and this is the Untergasse. And my family's house was just below the church, on the Obergasse. It was Obergasse 3, that was the address. And here is the house in which my mother was born, and which the family had actually owned for about, well, over 300 years at the time. And you can see the town is very old. This photo was taken about 1930. And this is actually, this little girl standing in front is one of my aunts. Now in this talk, I mean, I want to talk a little bit about the fact that for almost from my earliest years, I have known about what happened in Europe. It was never a secret. I was born in 1940. And of course, at that point, it became more and more obvious that the family members who had been left in Europe were not going to survive for the most part. It was not clear. I mean, people hoped, but it became more and more fraught. And I was aware of that right from the beginning. And through the years, I really became obsessed with this whole question of what had happened in Europe, what had happened to my family, although I didn't do anything about it. I was busy, of course. I had a career. I was a professor. I was a professor of medieval studies, not German. And I had children. I had 3 children to raise. But once I got on in life, and especially after my mother died, I was able to address myself to the whole question of how do I investigate what happened to my family. So what I'm going to do in this talk is look first at the pre-Nazi period when German Jews were citizens, and especially in the area of Hesse, where my mother was from, were very well assimilated. I mean, it's not, they lived in some sense their own life. They had kosher butchers. In fact, my family was a family of butchers, from what I understand. They didn't generally intermarry, but they, in terms of their economic life and their social life, they were pretty much assimilated. I would do that. Then I want to look at the early 1930s after the Nazis came to power, and then the later 1930s to show how life changed for the Jewish citizens of Germany. I have an enormous amount of evidence that I drew on. As Jeff mentioned, there were about 1,500 letters that came from Europe between 1937 and the early 1940s, when, of course, the letters stopped. From the photos, my mother, when she sailed to this country with my father, did not bring much with her. They really had no possessions, but her mother had given her all the family photographs, and there were hundreds of them. So I'm very fortunate in that sense that I have many photos going back several generations. I looked at archives. Luckily, I was accustomed to doing research. And then I became friends with several German scholars who worked locally, both on my mother's family's history and the history of the town where my mother grew up, and on which I hope I can get to, my father's family's history. And because, of course, I only have a short period of time, I'll focus on a few incidents. I want to let you know that the book is filled with incidents, details, many narratives about what occurred. Okay, if you turn to slide 3, Jeff. Okay, I just want to show you, I have photographs. These are, you can see their dates. They died in 1889. They were born sometime in the 1820s or 1830s. I don't have the birthdays for these two, for Luke, who's my great-great-grandfather, and my great-great-grandmother. It looks like she has no teeth. But in any case, you can see that they are, pretty much middle-class people, or lower middle-class people. I know that my great-grandfather, Aaron, here, was a butcher. I assume that his father was also a butcher. I'm going to talk a little bit about the family name. That name, Rodensies, is a very unusual name. And just very fortunately, there are actually two written accounts, two accounts in the records in the town of Zwingenberg of how that name came about, because it's almost unknown except in my family. Apparently, at the time of the Napoleonic, after the Napoleonic changes, after the reforms, the Napoleonic reforms in the early part of the 19th century, Jews in Germany were told to take real last names, to take actual surnames, unlike the patronymic, Ben so-and-so, that they had been using up until that time. And everyone had to report to the town hall or wherever it locally was indicated to declare what the last thing was. Now, the two versions differ slightly in that in one, the responder, my ancestor, whoever he was a wise guy, and in the other one, he didn't seem to understand quite what was going on. But what he said to when asked what the name was going to be, what he said to his interrogator was, in the local dialect, he said, "Rotensies," which is the dialect for Rottensee, which means you guess it. You guess what the name is going to be. You decide. So that became the name. It is an unusual name. Jeff, can you go on to the next slide, please? Okay, well, this is a picture which I'm very grateful for. These are the children of Aaron and Sarah. I want to talk a little bit about them. The only one I knew was this sister. Her name was Betty when she was born. She was born in 1877, and she came to America by herself in 1895. So she became the sole representative of the older generation to those of us who were in America. Those of us who were in she came to New York by herself. She was adventurous. She was also a little bit of a pain, from what my mother said, always giving everybody a hard time. So they were not exactly sorry to get rid of her. Anyway, these are the 6 Rodensies children. Lena, the oldest, died in 1932 of cancer. Max, very sad story. He had what was called St. Vitus dance. Sydenham's Korea, the official name, and he committed suicide in the early part of the 20th century when he was a very young man. Herman, as you can see, he must have been a lively young boy, because Betty, the disciplinarian, is stilling his hand. You have to stand very still for these old photos. This is my grandmother, Martha, looking rather terrified by the whole process. And here's the baby of the family, Clara, who actually, Martha, my grandmother, died during the Hitler period, partly of starvation, partly of suicide. Clara and her husband were deported to Estonia, where they were, at the famous massacre at Rasaku, where they were shot upon arrival. All right, next slide, please. Here's a picture of a few of them as young adults. Here is Herman in uniform, my grandmother, Betty. This picture may well have been taken. She was called Bessie by this time. She had changed her name. She thought Betty was too old-fashioned. This may have been taken in the U.S. in New York. We don't know. Someone had cut the picture before I got it. And Clara, the youngest, as you can see, was a very beautiful woman. Okay, the next slide, please. These are my grandparents. My grandmother, Martha Rodensees, married a man named Moritz Schack, married in 1911. My guess is it was an arranged marriage because he came from a very tiny village, maybe 20 miles or so from where she lived. And my guess, and she was a little old already at the time. She was 26, which was old, but it can have been very easy to find Jewish partners if that's what anyone wanted. If you can skip, before I go to the next photo, if you can skip down 2 photos to, I'd like to show the children. 2 photos, yeah, there. They started having children immediately. They were married in 1911. He opened a butcher shop, which is what his father had also had. I don't know whether it was a kosher butcher or not, to tell you the truth. And these are, the children started coming, as you can see, very rapidly. This is my mother, and this is her brother, who was only a year younger. He was the only boy in what became a family of 4 girls and a boy. And this is the 3rd child. You can see my mother was born in 1912. 1 year later, her brother was born in 1913, a year after that. And Lena, who was the next one, was born in 1915. I'm going to get back to these 2 in a minute. So if you can go back, the two photos, please, Jeff. The next one, yeah, here. So in 1912 and 1913, there were babies born. In 1915, there were babies born, which meant that my grandmother was pregnant in 1914. What happened in 1914? Of course, it was World War I started. My grandfather was drafted in 1914. He was not to return home until the early 1920s. He was first fighting on the Russian front, and then this picture was sent from Latvia, where he was fighting. And he's fighting on the Russian front. He was imprisoned by the Russians for several years. If you go to the next picture, it's a little bit of an outlier, but I had to show it. This is my grandfather. This is Moritz's father, Nathan Schack. And you can see he lived a very long life. He was born in 1844. He actually fought in the Franco-Prussian War. He was a soldier, Franco-Prussian War. He was sitting in front of his house in 1935. Now, you know, in 1935, the Nuremberg laws were put into effect, which more or less ostracized all Jews and prohibited them from doing pretty much anything in the larger society. Children could no longer go to school except to Jewish schools. Professionals could no longer work at their professions. Storekeepers could no longer deal with non-Jewish customers. No one could deal with non-Jew. No Jew could deal with anyone non-Jewish, in fact, in any kind of official way. They were prohibited from all recreation facilities, and they were more or less isolated. But in 1935, a photographer, after the passage of the Nuremberg laws, a photographer was going through the villages of the Bergstrasse looking to illustrate what, of course, for the Germans was very important, this idyllic version of an Aryan fatherland. And he saw my grandfather, and he took this photo. You can see it's a professional photo of this old man smoking his pipe. And it was published on the cover of the magazine with the words, "Ein echter Odenwalder Bauer," a true Odenwald peasant. Imagine this old Jew was being presented as a symbol of an Aryan, of a racially authentic German. Okay, we can go to the next picture. We can go to the next picture now. Okay, I just want to say, in the early 1920s, I'm not sure of the exact date, my grandfather came home from the Russian front. He had won 2 Iron Crosses for bravery, or for his service, or for whatever he got it for. Immediately, they started having children again. Now, what had happened to him in the course of his service was that his one arm had been put out of commission. And it was clear that he could no longer be a butcher. You know, you need the strength. I mean, being a butcher required a lot of strength. And it was also the 1920s, when it was a very difficult time economically. They were very poor. My grandfather sold, in order to make some money, he was selling cigarettes up and down the Bergstrasse to various taverns and stores and so forth, but it didn't bring them a lot of money. But the children started immediately again, one after another, until when Margot was born, my mother's older sister, Lena, remember, the oldest of the siblings, my mother's older sister, went to my grandparents and said, "Das ist alles, you know, no more. That's it." And she ordered my grandfather to sleep downstairs and my grandmother to sleep upstairs. And that was that. There were no more children. Okay, next picture, please. Next slide. I want to talk a little bit about my mother's schooling. I have many pictures of her schools. This is the earliest, and this is the latest that I have, but she has many photos from in between. My mother was an outstanding student. She was the top student in whatever school she went to. And here she is. Well, she went to, my mother loved school right from the start. She went to the church nursery school, which apparently was the only one, the preschool was the only kindergarten, you know, that was the only one in the village. She went to the public elementary school first, you know, the early school. And then at the age of 9, she was given a scholarship to this school in a nearby town, larger town of Bensheim, called the Higher Daughter School, the Tochterschule. And here she is in the back row, where she once again was an outstanding student. She was very proud of how good she had been in school. She brought with her to New York her report card, and she showed it to me very often when I was a child. The way in which German report cards were graded was 1 is the top grade, and 1, you know, we would call it excellent, but my mother always translated it as perfect. And if you looked through the years from 9 to 17, when she was at this school, all her academic grades were 1. There was a sprinkling of 2s, which was like for sewing and crafts and things. And there were 3s throughout, a bunch of 3s for gym. My mother never liked gym, and she was not very good at it, any kind of physical movement. This was her very last school. Whoops. This was her very last school. And that is a story as well. When she graduated from the Tochterschule at the age of 17, everyone expected her. Now, this was in 1927. 1928, something like that. Everyone expected her to go on to the gymnasium to make the Abitur test, to get prepared for the Abitur, to go to the university. She was a really fine student. She said no. She was not going, she decided, I mean, she was on her way to do that and all, and she rebelled and she said, no, I'm not going to do that. I am going to business school and I'm going to make money. And that's precisely what she did. And of course, everyone was horrified, the teachers, her family, everyone, because they had expected her to go to university. And she did not. And, you know, the irony is that that's what probably saved her life. Because had she been involved in a university program in the late 1920s and the early 1930s, the chances are she would not have left Germany when she did. But if you go on to the next slide. Okay, just another story about someone who got out early. And this is my mother's brother, Leo, the one who was just a year younger than her. He was a great soccer player of the region. He was remembered long after the war. He actually he immigrated to Mexico. He could never get into the US. He immigrated to Mexico from France in 1941. What happened was that he was the only Jew on the soccer team. You can imagine, you know, the Jews generally did not go in for sports in Germany, or not mixed, you know, mixed religion sports, you know, ecumenical sports. He was the official soccer team. It looks like he was the goalie. Yeah, this is him. This is Leo right here. And he was playing cards with a bunch of his Gentile friends one day. This was April 1933. And there was expected to be trouble because Hitler's birthday was coming up. And one of his friends, another friend, came rushing in and said, they're going to arrest you today. We've got to get you out. We've got to get you out of Germany. And he rushed him. He wouldn't even let him stop to say goodbye to his parents. He rushed him to the train station. It's very close to France. He said, you're going to Saarbrücken, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, which was an independent territory between France and Germany, where his uncle lived, and uncle and aunt, Uncle Herman, and his sister, my mother, was as well. So you can say that soccer saved his life, and he went on from his uncle's. His uncle gave him money to go to Paris. He lived in Paris for a number of months until he realized he's trying to get the rest of his family out of Germany with no success. And eventually he had to leave Paris. It was impossible for him to make a living. And through a series of accidents, coincidences, whatever it is, he ended up in Marseille. I'm not going to talk about that, where he lived for quite a number of years. He married a German woman he met in Marseille. Okay, slide 11, please. Okay, I just want to show a couple of pictures of the family before the Nazis came to, what I have, you know, before the Nazis came to power and after the Nazis came to power. This is my grandmother, Martha, and this is her sister, Lena, the oldest of the sisters, who died in 1932. This is taken around 1929, 1930. I'm guessing largely by the apparent age of the children. Otherwise, it's very hard to tell if the photo's not dated. And these are the three younger children. Lena, who's about 15, Susie, who's probably about 6 or 7 here, and Margot, who's 5, whatever it is, something like that. And this picture is taken after 1934. And this was the last visit that Irma, my mother, and Lena, this is the last visit they had at home. The last time they saw their parents. And they came at that time because their father had been, there was a pogrom in 1934 where throughout Germany, many Jewish men were arrested and imprisoned for a while. He was released after 3 weeks because of his military service. He was let out early. He and and Uncle Jakob had both been arrested. Uncle Jakob, this is Tante Clara and her husband, Uncle Jakob. They obviously had beaten him, broken his arm. His fingers had already been damaged during the World War, but here his arm had been broken as well. And you can see that there's a difference. You can't see my grandmother here, but if you look how much she's aged in that brief period of time, you can get some idea of what things were like. Of course, the girls, this was before the Nuremberg laws, the girls don't show it very much at all. But I want to show you the big difference that occurred in the space of a few months in the town of Zwingenweg. And I'm going to read a little bit newspaper clippings. I'm going to read from some newspaper clippings. The first one I'm going to read is October 1st, 1932. And this is just a local first paper. It says, today, our Israelite fellow citizens are celebrating their New Year's holiday. According to their reckoning, it is 5963. Notice our Israelite fellow citizens. October 8th, our Israelite fellow citizens will celebrate their highest holiday, the Day of Atonement, next Monday. October 14th, for the Israelites, the Christian month of October is the month of most holidays. Accordingly, on the 1st of October, they celebrated their new year. The first month of the Israelite year is called Tishri. From the 15th to the 22nd of October, they celebrate the Feast of Bowers, Sukkot. On the 23rd of October, with the Day of the Joy of the Laws, Simchat Torah, the circle of special holidays is completed. Now, these stories, these notices, in their very ordinariness, reveal a lot about Jewish-Gentile relations in small-town Germany before the Nazi era, especially in Hesse, where the Jews were so assimilated. Although considered somewhat exotic, the Jews were fellow citizens. Although their customs needed some explanation, their celebrations were accorded respect. But after the Nazis took power, the following year, they came into power on January 30th of 1933. Only 2 months after that, this appeared in one of the newspapers. Yesterday morning, this is in March, yesterday morning in Bensheim, I remember that's the town where my mother went to school, in Bensheim too, Jewish businesses were shut down as an angry population confronts a danger to peace and order. The dreadful Jewish propaganda, the boycott of German goods, and the persecution of our German countrymen abroad. And this is all responding to published reports of various Nazi actions against the Jews abroad, have brought the population to the highest pitch of agitation. And even earlier than that, the local newspaper had quoted Hitler's close associate, Goering, of course, the Nazi Party leader, Hermann Goering, as the state of provocation against Jewish inhabitants is continually growing. There is nothing to do but place more and more Jews in protective custody. They are being brought to the district jail where they will stay. And of course, the pogroms against the Jews continued, and the tightening of their lives just continued as well.
Joan, not to interrupt, how much more time do you have? I just want to let you know you're at half hour.
Oh, I am at the half hour. I've got lots more, so I can't continue it. Let me just speak about Kristallnacht, okay? And then I'll end. Kristallnacht in the town. Can you go on to the next? If you go on to the next slide. Yeah, okay. This is the day after Kristallnacht. And I just want to read what happened in Swingerberg during Kristallnacht. You can see these are people gathered in the morning after these two houses have been burnt out. You can see they were Jewish houses that had been burnt out. And I'm just going to read a report from a contemporary scholar of let me see, let me find what page that's on. 65. Okay, here we go. I'm just going to read that and then I will end, although that's obviously. All right, the events of what became known as Kristallnacht also had a serious impact. Kristallnacht, often called the Night of Broken Glass, loosely refers to the days immediately preceding and following November 9th, 1938. According to a report of one Swingerberg resident, the campaign against the Jews that went through the whole of Germany also affected our community. On the 10th of November, 1938, there occurred brutish and violent demolitions of all the Jewish residents in the town, and pieces of furniture were set afire. Schoolboys smashed in the doors and windows of Jewish homes. Now that's a quotation from a book called Mitten unter uns, in the midst of it, written by a historian from the area. And he documents all the events. And let me just read a little bit. According to witnesses, now this is now me talking about what happened. According to the witnesses, in the early morning hours of November 9th to 10th, 4 SS men carrying hammers and axes left their headquarters and headed towards my grandparents' house on Obergasse 3. Although the front door was locked, the first floor tenant heard the commotion and opened it. The SS men stormed upstairs, burst through the entry of the apartment, and attacked the furnishings, smashing dishes, porcelain, and glass, and tossing the broken furniture into the street. My grandmother in her nightgown and the two girls, they were the only ones left, the two youngest girls, emerged screaming from their bedrooms. According to one witness, Frau Schack and the children screamed so terribly that I thought they were being beaten. The SS men then slashed open all the down comforters and shook their contents into the street. The result, a witness testified, was that the whole street was full of goose feathers. It looked as if it were snowing. They then set fire to the bedclothes. And then, of course, they went to the other Jewish houses and destroyed it all. And he ended up at the third Jewish house on the Marktplatz, which was the marketplace. And by the evening, they made the inhabitant of that house, and I don't know who it was, scrub the Marktplatz with a toothbrush. That was one of their favorite. Things. So what happened, of course, was after Kristallnacht, they had to get the girls out of Germany. That was their main concern. The parents themselves could not, but they had to get them out, and they sent the girls to their brother in Marseille. And that's as far as I can get in the story, but I continue the story really until with the family, with both what happened to those who perished and those who survived and managed to emigrate in one way or the other, either before or after the war. I bring the story more or less to 1960 because, of course, I started to write about the prisoners of memory, the survivors, and I ended up writing a much longer book and going back much further than I had intended. So that's, if you're interested, the book, let me just say one thing about the book. The ebook is very inexpensive. It's only like $6, $7. The paperback is much more expensive. It's now selling for under $20 on Amazon. With the list price is $24, but it's selling cheaper. And the ebook has no photographs. The paperback has more than 100 photographs. As I said, I have hundreds of photographs. So that is it. And I just want to say that all my original material will be going to the Leo Baeck Society when I can get it together to pack it up for them. As I told you, I'm born in 1940. I'm now 83, and none of my children speak German. So they will not be of use to them. They all said I should give it to Leo Beck for further use by scholars and those who are interested. Anyway, thank you for listening, and I look forward to your questions.
All right, we're going to hold questions until the joint Q&A at the end, but I wanted to thank you, Joan. When I first met Joan, and Joan is what is your professor? You again, just repeat what you.
Professor of English I am now Professor Emerita of English from Yeshiva University.
Okay, and when she told me about this trove of history that she has been digging through, I only could think about myself, and I'm sure that the same thoughts probably are in many of you, that, you know, we grew up with our parents who were survivors, and we didn't have the history. And we certainly, I know from the group, and when I ask questions about grandparents and parents, very few have many photos, and some have none. And the fact that you have such a robust history is so beautiful for you.
Well, I wasn't actually able to the photos, yes, I was smart enough as my mother got, you know, old, as my mother got into her 80s, and my father died when he was 45. So I know much less about his family, although quite a bit. There's a large chapter devoted to his family and what occurred in the book. But I made my mother go through the photos, and she had this, you know, she was a very smart woman. She had this phenomenal memory, and she could remember the birth dates of all the people in the photos. So I wrote them on the back, you know, of the photos. So I have the information. This was long before Ancestry.com, you know, will help you with these things. But I did that. I was smart enough to do that, but my mother never wanted me to look at the letters, and the letters were a problem because they were in German script. And while I could make it out, I was not a fluent German speaker. I had forgotten it. It was my first language, but I had refused to speak it as I got older. And my mother wouldn't let me look at the letters. She didn't want them. She didn't want me to. And I really only got to look at them after she died. My mother died in 1999, and it took me about 20 years to, you know, be able to write the book, to get my information together so that I could write this book. And I couldn't really finish it until I retired, you know, from teaching. Teaching is craves a lot of time and effort, and I just was not teaching and, you know, working as a scholar as well. And Yeshiva was nice enough. Actually, they were good enough to give me a native German Orthodox, you know, a native German speaker who was a student at Yeshiva, had been born in Hamburg and grown up there, as a transcriber. I didn't need a translator, but I needed someone to put it into type for me, because I couldn't read the script, you know, German script. If any of you are familiar with German script, you know how difficult it is to read. And he did that for me. And what he couldn't read, which was my paternal grandmother, she wrote in the Sütterlin script, the really difficult script. It's another part of my story. She died recently. I had a German half sister from an early marriage with my father, a Gentile half sister, and she transcribed it. So I've had a lot of contact with Germany.
John, I'm going to ask you, maybe if
you're
willing to put your contact information in chat. I'm sure people would like to learn more about you. If anybody is interested in Leo Beck, I have a personal relationship with Leo Beck. You can use my name and contact Michael Simonson, who is
I know Michael. Yeah,
he's one of the leaders there in Leo Beck in New York. And so I'm going to take a second and I want to put a little space between Joan's presentation and Mirla's. Mirla and Marilyn, I would like you to make sure that your audio is up as far as it can go so everyone can hear you. I'm going to share my screen and play a little bit of a nice song here for us.
טסים לעולם. כי אתה מלך אדון לכל השלום. כי אתה מלך אדון לכל השלום. שלום רב על ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. שלום רב על ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. וטוב בעיניך לברך את עמך ישראל בכל עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. שלום רב. שלום רב. שלום רב על ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. שלום רב על ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. תשים לעולם. תשים לעולם.
Okay, and we are back. And those of you who are interested, that was Cantor Brooke from Park Avenue Synagogue in New York. You can see how beautiful that synagogue is from those windows. And I am going to now introduce our second presenter. Just give me a second here. That is Mirla Raz, and she's going to be talking about her book, The Bird Sang Eulogies. In the mid-1990s, Mirla videotaped her parents' Holocaust experiences. Years later, those riveted stories were memorialized in the book, The Bird Sang Eulogies, a memoir. Daniel, sorry for the mispronunciation, Gesselwitz survived the Lutz ghetto, Auschwitz, and 6 subsequent concentration camps, barely alive in May 2nd, 1945. He was liberated by American soldiers. Mira's survival trajectory began when Hitler broke his pact with Stalin. Anna Gesselwitz, née Charlotte Gersten, survived the Lvov ghetto. She obtained papers as a Catholic and fled to Germany, where she worked as a maid in German household. During the German retreat, she was forced to dig trenches for the retreating German army. Liberated in January 1945, she made her way back to Lvov, refusing to stay in Poland, on a move to Lüneburg, Germany, where she met Daniel. And so I introduce to you Mira. And Mira, you can take the presentation now. So you need to share your screen. There you go. Good job. And you have to unmute yourself, Mirla, please. You have to, are you unmuted? We can't hear you. Mirla, unmute yourself. You're still muted, Mirla.
Okay, here we go. Now I'm going to share the screen and whoops. Okay.
Yep. And start your slideshow.
1 minute, I need to get the correct share. Okay.
Click on it.
Share.
You're right.
Slide.
Yeah, there you
Yeah,
go.
1 minute. I want to get the right one here. I don't know what happened here.
You're fine. All you have to do is hit the arrow and you'll go to the next slide.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll leave it at that. I wanted to get the whole screen. I wanted to get this on the whole screen, but that's not going to happen. Okay. And you can hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hello to everyone, and thank you for attending this presentation. And a special thank you to Jeffrey for inviting me to present this morning, or this afternoon, or this evening, wherever anybody is. As Jeffrey said, both of my parents were survivors from Poland. I videotaped my parents' testimonies in 1994. I memorialized their testimonies in the book, The Birds Sang Eulogies, a Memoir, in 2019. I got the title from the book from one of my mother's poems about the Holocaust. My father was 15 when the Germans marched into Lodz in September of 1939. The Jews were all forced into the ghetto, which was hermetically sealed. The ghetto was liquidated in August of 1944, and subsequent to that, my father was shipped to 6 different concentration camps. He was liberated on May 2nd, 1945, by the Americans. My father was the youngest of 7 children, 5 boys and 2 girls. He survived with 1 brother, my Uncle Leo. Behind me, you can see a stained glass. My father did that after he retired. And there is a tremendous amount of symbolism in this stained glass. There's the dark sky, the fire, the lives of the Jews that were turned upside down, a mother with a baby, the Torah, everything being burned, as the Jews of Europe were burned. My mother grew up in Lvov, now Lviv, in the Ukraine. She was 18 when the Germans entered Lvov, and she and her family and the rest of the Jews were forced into the Lvov ghetto. Her parents were able to purchase papers for my mother and her sisters, papers to identify them as Christian women. My mother and her sister escaped the ghetto, and they lived as Christians in Lvov. They were forced to flee Poland, and they fled into Germany, where my mother worked as a maid. She was liberated in January 1945 by the Russians. My mother was the third of 4 children. She had 2 older sisters and a younger brother. Her parents, oldest sister, and brother perished in the war. The book, The Birds Sang Eulogies, a Memoir, follows my parents' lives before, during, and after the Holocaust. I would now like to share with you a few unforgettable stories from the book. The cover of the book is a photo of taken by Henrik Ross. Henrik Ross was told by the Germans to take propaganda pictures of life in the ghetto. He was given a camera to do so. Whenever he could, Henrik took pictures of real life in the ghetto. This was at great risk to himself, his wife, and anybody who helped him. This is a picture that I discovered in 2017. As you look at this man, try to think about what he is thinking. It is a picture of my father as he is being herded along with the other Jews to the train cars that await him to take them to Auschwitz. I discovered this photograph in 2017. My father had no idea it existed. He was no longer alive. I discovered it when I went to an exhibit at the Boston Art Museum. And it was an exhibit of Henrik Ross's photographs of the ghetto. When I look at this picture of my father, my heart breaks. He has no idea what is awaiting him. And it was, the next 9 months would be of torture. There's a pounding sound going on.
I don't hear it.
No, I hear a pounding sound.
Okay, just continue.
Okay. Then there is the story of the belt. When my father was 13, he found a leather belt in the street. This belt stayed with him throughout the war. As I mentioned earlier, my dad was 15 when the Germans marched into Lodz. He was liberated when he was 21. He managed to keep the belt on him during those 6 long years. As starvation ravaged his body, he had to make new holes so the belt would stay on him. At the end of the war, the belt was 7 inches in diameter. That was about the size of a small size pizza pie or the waist of a 3-year-old boy. The belt is the only thing he has from before the war. I will be donating this belt to a museum in the future. When my mother and her sister lived outside of the ghetto, as Christian women, life was not easy at all. My mother was in constant terror of being discovered. On a number of occasions, Ukrainian teenagers would threaten my mother. She had to keep them quiet by giving them money and jewelry. And then she ran out of the money and jewelry and became much more desperate, and her situation very, very dire. She was living with her sister in the apartment of an old lady when there was a knock on the door. The old woman went to answer the door, and there was a Nazi standing there. The Nazi said that he heard that there were 2 Jewish women living in the apartment. The woman said there weren't 2 Jewish women living with her, and that he should go down and speak with the superintendent. Surprisingly, he did leave. Once he was away, my mother and my aunt fled the apartment and hid. The next morning, they went to an employment agency that sent Polish workers to Germany. They felt they would be safer in Germany than Poland. Why? Because the Germans couldn't tell who was Jewish and who was not. My parents met in Lüneburg, Germany, and you can see a picture of their wedding. That's a wedding photograph, and then a picture of my parents later in life. They married in August of 1948 and immigrated to the United States in January of 1950. I was born 6 weeks later, and here you can see, if you look down to the bottom of the names, not towards the bottom, towards the middle, their names are there, and they lived in Brooklyn at 522 Hinsdale Street. My mom was an extremely quiet woman. She rarely wore her emotions on her sleeve. However, she expressed her feelings in her poetry. The book, The Bird Sang Eulogies, a memoir, includes her emotional poems about the Holocaust. I would now like to read you a short version, a part of one of her poems, I Dare Not Dream. I dare not dream of youthful passions, of starry nights on lovely sessions, the warming sun, the fragrant air. I dare not dream of morning fair. I dare not dream of high above, where sky and clouds combine in love, where birds their pinions stretched are free. I dare not dream. I dare not be. I dare not dream of drifting air to bring good rides with me to share. I gaze into the dark abyss and dare not dream life's wondrous bliss. I dare not dream of music flowing through breezes of the wind come blowing to whisper on my windowsill. I dare not dream, my yearnings fill. I dare not dream of life out there, proud nature and muses share, my thoughts run in forbidden stream. I dare not dream, I dare not dream. I would invite you to visit my website, https:// whatever that's called, Bird Sang Eulogies. And the book is available on Amazon. That's a tiny URL for it. I would encourage that you read the book and learn about the details of my parents' lives before, during, and after the war. It is written in 4 voices, that of my parents, the survivors, me, a 2G, and my daughter, Karen, a 3G. It also tells about a trip we took to Poland. I took a trip to Poland with my parents, where I saw my father's home, and I was able to go up the stairs. I think I have a picture of that. Let's see. No, I don't. Well, let me see. Well, I might have a picture, but at any rate, I was able to go up the stairs. I did knock on the apartment where he lived, and nobody answered. I also talk about the continued victimization of the survivors. And then my daughter talks about her visit to Poland. So I would encourage you to read the book for the details. I would like to thank you once again. Thank you, Jeffrey, for inviting me, and thank you, everyone, for attending.
If you can stop your screen share.
I will do that.
And thank you so much, Mirla. That is really, now everyone actually can see what's behind you and the power. Yes. Your presentation is emotive, powerful, and absolutely beautiful. And I encourage everyone to do what you suggest, is to read those poems. And you have a unique voice, that you have 3 generations. And it's so special that your daughter is contributing to the legacy of your parents. So I think that is absolutely terrific. And we're going to all have questions for you jointly at the end of the program. So I'm going to take the screen share back and provide the next part of our program. And I've presented the Portnoy boys Portnoy brothers before in our program, but here's an interesting take. It took those boys almost 30 years to pull their father, who was a very famous cantor, into a video, and so it was just released, and so I thought you would all enjoy it very much. So here we go.
חיים היא למחזיקים בה ותומכיה מאושר. עץ חיים היא למחזיקים בה
Okay, and we're back, and I'm going to present the background for Maryland. A second, hold on a minute. One second. Marilyn, I'm struggling with my bio, so maybe you can.
You know what? These are wonderful people. They don't need to know who I am. Do you? Anyone who needs to know who I am, raise your hand. Awesome. Okay, I can tell you a little bit. I can. But I think time is more important in the telling of the story.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Hi, my name is Marilyn Price. I am a puppeteer, storyteller. My family story is not anywhere near like the ones that you've just heard or the ones that biographies have been written about. My job in the world is to make sure the story is told. So in the ways that I have done that for adults and kids is through the magic of puppetry. So you can see my cast and crew is right behind me. I run a business in puppets. I also run a not-for-profit organization that teaches all sorts of educators, experiential and in classroom, how to reach all different kinds of learners. I live in a tiny little village called Chicago, Illinois. I was born in 1944. My family had been in the States, my immediate family, since the early 1900s. They came from Romania and Russia. My husband's family were in Poland and Germany, and many, many were lost. Unfortunately, he was not blessed with the stories. So it has been my job in a lot of the things that I do to make sure that not only people tell their stories, and I'm extraordinarily grateful for those who have told today and to the many others that do. There are also many wonderful historical nonfictions that are going around these days. I would recommend many to you, but you can find them yourself. But what I would love to do is to introduce you to some of our heroes who saved the stories and who saved the arts and form that I use today called puppetry. And I'll do that in a variety of different ways. I'll also introduce you to a fine craft that my grandpa, who was Russian born and came to the United States, again in the early 1900s, but who made his way with a variety of different things. They call that in his day the entrepreneurial thing, which meant he really hardly ever made any money. But one of the things he did do was during the Depression, he sold puppets made out of socks with red heels. So apparently I did not know that when I started, but one of the things he taught me at the dining room table where all stories were told was how to use anything around me to tell the story. And I'd like to equate that with, I think in my research, was probably happening in some of the camps. The stories were told in albeit horrifying conditions, but that's how we remember things. It's all about the story. Let me tell you about one particular family that escaped the Holocaust and hid away. They took all of their puppet creations and they buried them in the ground. And then after the war, they came back, dug them out and took them to Northern California. And then they became puppeteers. Their name was Osnowitz. And although the long name probably is not familiar to you, the short name might be. So here's a picture of he who became a puppeteer like his parents. That is Frank Oz. And the puppet that he's holding is Animal. And I think that is a very important thing to remember. Many of his characterizations, the animal, and Miss Piggy are overlap to other artists who use those same sort of characters through puppetry and other things and stories for kids to emphasize things that have happened to us. So Frank Oz, when he was a kid, Frank Osnowitz, when he was a kid, found in the family attic a collection of puppets that his parents had fashioned out of wood, marionettes, which is the Italian word for string puppet, and hid them away right before they escaped. Now, and the interesting part about that to him was, why would they need to do that? And they were a form of fighting against oppression. So I'm going to show you this picture. I did not make a slide of it. I didn't know if it was how legal this would be. There was an issue. So if you would look very carefully at that, that is a puppet of Hitler. So you might think that that would be something that would honor Hitler, but in fact, Hitler would not have enjoyed that. It was one of the ways that artists fought against the oppression. So these puppets were just on display in the great city of New York in a exhibit called The Osnowitz Story. And I don't know where it is now, but I do know that he himself lives in New York on the Upper West Side. Other artists were saved by other fascinating characters. One who was a non-Jew whose name was Varian Fry, who saved the following artists by literally helping them over the mountain and going into countries where it was safe. So just let me throw in names out. If you recognize any of them, perchance you will honor this man as well. He was never honored in his own time. These are some of the artists that he saved. Marcel Duchamp, André Masson, Marc Chagall, Max Ernst. Many of them didn't want to leave. Jacques Lipschitz and his wife. He saved musicians. He saved Nobel Prize winner Otto Meyerhoff. And he did it out of humanitarian. He also raised most of the money by himself, died in poverty, and his family inherited some of the pictures that were given to him by these artists who were not yet as famous as they were when Varian Fry died. These are the people that helped save the arts. I forgot to show you Frank Oz's favorite. If you're not a Muppet follower, which is too bad, you should be, he did Miss Piggy. And he also did another one that you may actually could resonate with our people, and that would be Yoda, the very wise Yoda. And that puppet is in Brooklyn in a museum where it lives permanently. So one other family, two actually. Well, there's probably more, but I'm just going to focus on two more saviors before I tell you a story using some of my characters and tell you why puppets work. Many of you have probably, I was about to say heard, but you would never have heard him. Many of you have probably seen Marcel Marceau. You wouldn't have heard him because he was a world famous mime. But Marcel Marceau, when he was a kid, another fabulous story, saved kids. And the way he saved them on the trains, because he helped them go save the children that were being sent away from their families. And in order to make them be quiet, he developed this art form called mime, and he would perform for them. And they might have laughed, but he told them in the way that he performed that to be a mime was a far better thing than to not speak. After the war, he went on to study, and he took the art form of being a mime to places that it probably never would have been. A hero, Marcel Marceau. One of my personal favorite heroes was Monkey, named Curious George. And Curious George was developed, excuse me, one moment, so I can tell you a story, by a family named Ray, which was their short form name. The Ray family, the husband and wife, met, married, loved Paris. They lived there for quite a while, and then things got hard. And they knew they needed to escape. And they were both quite clever. They're also very, very fine children's authors. They had not yet published a book. They had a contract that was signed for their very first story, but times were not about publishing books, as you could probably well figure out. So they took their manuscripts and they hid them in an apartment, and then they proceeded to try to get out of town, or as we would say in the Great West, get out of town. And what they did was H.A. built a bicycle out of spare parts, and he and his wife Margaret bicycled across the country and escaped. And then they found their way eventually to America and were able to get their manuscripts. And they took their curious friend George and started a series of books to this very day that are not only very well read, but have been translated. I just found a translated version for you into a variety of languages, including that one. Curious George, if you study the character, you will note that he was obstreperous. He was never very obedient, and he, like many of our people, were able to survive. And my most favorite author of all, who told the story of his family escaping, was somebody who did not do it openly or even claim until 2004, when he wrote a version along with a klezmer band called Pincus and the Pig, which was a version of Peter and the Wolf to different music. His name was Maurice Sendak, and his very, very first really successful story was this one, Where the Wild Things Are, where he basically told the family story. He tells it like this. He says, every Friday night, the family would come for dinner. And my mother was a terrible cook. Not only was she a terrible cook, but she was really slow. So they would come on time because they had to also be there before Shabbat. And they were always hungry. And one of his uncles was very fond of pinching his cheeks and saying, I'm going to eat you up. Now, young Maurice Sendak believed that he really would. And from that formation and from his grandmother's very, very bitter experiences, created Where the Wild Things Are. Out of chaos comes story, and the stories must be told. I believe, and have had the pleasure of experiencing telling the stories to the kids and to some adults that don't want to hear them either. And it is imperative that we do. Quite a while back, I was hired by the Reform Movement to teach the teenagers in national movement in DC, and we took them through the museum and we experienced it. And then I was privileged to teach them how to acquire the stories from the then, it was 20 years ago at least, then survivors. And in their stead, they knew that eventually they were going to have to tell the stories themselves when we were all gone. And I am also currently working with a group called Second Gen to help people tell the stories that are hesitant to do so. Although I am clearly surrounded by those who are not afraid or who understand the needs. So I am privileged to do that. So my friend Jeffrey, who I've never yet met except for today, asked me if I could use puppets in doing that. So I'm going to do this in two different ways. And I'm going to do it by showing you what my grandpa showed me when I was just a little kid sitting around the table on Surf Street. I was very privileged to live 6 blocks from my grandparents. And my grandma had Parkinson's. So as often as I could, after school at the age of 5, because things were different then, I would walk down the street and Grandma and I would have coffee. Well, you know, for those of you who were taught very young to have coffee with their grandmothers, I would have a tiny bit of coffee in my glass of milk. And she would tell me stories. And she would tell me her adventures growing up in Chicago. And I would say to her all the things that I did. And when we would sit around the table, my grandpa, to amuse the children, although he was a very serious man, Mr. Berger, he would show us what we could do with things around the table. And that's how I built my career. My friends that are sitting behind me, who can't see you because they're puppets, have helped me tell the story, because puppets speak all languages. They are well over 3,000 years old, not my puppets, and certainly not the ones I made. And by the ways that they relate to people of all ages, even kids, is that they allow you to use your imagination to remove yourselves from serious situations. They are used in therapy. They're used in an incredible wide range of ways that help people speak. The story I'm about to tell you is a fable of sorts. It was taken from a poem by Pastor Martin Niemöller that I know most of you know, that was written in the time of the Holocaust to tell people not to be quiet, to speak out. And it wasn't written by a Jew, and it wasn't necessarily for the Jew, but for the people that surrounded us. Someone later on the line decided that the story needed to be told to children. So before I start, I'm going to take this poem, this prayer from a book I wrote with a friend of mine, a rabbi friend, that is a series of 52 of the beautiful old blessings that we have been gifted in our religion, with stories about each one. The book is called From Gratitude to Blessings and Back, easy enough to find. But this is one I would like to dedicate to all of the people that have, not only who have lived, who are no longer with us. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, melech ha'olam dayen ha'emet. Blessed are you, eternal one, our God, the sovereign of all worlds, the true judge. To all of those who have lived, to all of those who we remember. So we're sitting around the table and Grandpa picks up a napkin. We've always used cloth napkins because that's what you did. You didn't want to waste paper. And what you did was you took the napkin and Grandpa would just hold his fist up, which always terrified little 5, 6-year-old little Marilyn Lieb. And then he would say, you hold it like this. And then he would autumn. It was quite marvelous. He would take it and he would make for me a character to sit at the table. And I don't know what, he had a variety of stories. He had the Ritzy Cracker Man that my brother would tell to me later on. But then he made me this. And he would tell me stories about bunnies, lots of stories about bunnies. So when I found this story, I said to myself, this is a story that needs to be told. And this was a story of fable taken from that original poem and written by Eve Bunting. The first time I told it was at a memorial service on the 49th anniversary of the Holocaust in an organization, the Midwest Jewish Council, that I was honored and privileged to speak at. And I brought him along and introduced my rabbit. And the story goes like this. It was peaceful in the forest. The birds flitted and flew. The porcupines walked along with spiny quills, laid back, quiet. The squirrels chattered with their bushy tails. The frogs hopped. The fish swam with their scales glistening in the sun, and the little rabbit, with his smile, father smiled as a rabbit could smile. It's so peaceful in the forest. Yes, my son, all is peaceful. Until the day the terrible things came. The shadow covered the forest, and the noise was terrible, and so were the smells. They quickly covered the forest with their nets and said, we want all things with feathers. The birds looked quickly for a place to hide. They flittered. They flew as fast as they could, but the nets caught them and dragged them away. It was quiet in the forest. The little rabbit said to his fathers, why did they take away the birds? And the father rabbit said, it makes no difference. You don't have feathers. Pay no attention. So all was peaceful in the forest. Oh yes, there were no birds, but there were porcupines. Oh, and the squirrels with their bushy tails, they climbed the trees, they chattered as squirrels do in the spring. In summer, all was peaceful, and the water shone on the fish's back. And then they came again with their terrible smell, their terrible noises. We want all things with bushy tails. Quickly, the rabbit turned around. We don't have bushy tails, just short little tails. Not us. No, not us. Don't take us. And they didn't. Oh, the squirrels scurried away. They chattered, they raced as fast as they could, but the nets flew out. And the squirrels were taken. The little rabbit said to his father, Why do they want bushy tails and feathers? The father said, it doesn't matter. They make too much noise anyway. And those squirrels were fussy, and they were stealing what belongs to us. It doesn't matter. Mind your business. And he did. It was peaceful in the forest. Oh, yes, the frogs hopped and the fish swam, and the sun caught on their scaly backs. It was beautiful, quieter than before, and all things were peaceful until they came again with their terrible noises and their terrible smells and their terrible roars. Quickly they said, we want all things that swim in the water. The fish tried to escape, they really did, but where could they go? They could have flown if only their wishes came true, but they didn't. And the terrible things with their terrible nets swooped down through the water and dragged away the fish and the frogs and all that lived underneath, and they were gone. And the little rabbit turned to his father. Why do they want the fish? Why do they want the squirrels with bushy tails? Why do they want the birds that fluttered? And father said, never mind, keep out of sight. And so they did. Yet for the next time there came the terrible smell and the terrible noises. They wanted all things with spiny quills, and they got them with their terrible nets. They dragged away everything except the bushy white rabbits who lived quietly, as quiet as they could. They didn't make a sound. They escaped the best they could till the day they came back with their terrible noises and their terrible sound for everything with white bushy tails that hopped. The little rabbit hid in the bush. He saw all that was left being taken away by the terrible things, by the terrible noises and the terrible smells, and then all was quiet in the forest. The little rabbit hopped away to tell the others before it was their turn, before it was too late. Something, he said, is happening here. There's a man with a gun out there telling you to stop and take care. You better stop. You better look around. Something heavy is coming down. The story was written, and the song that I quoted at the end, for a really good reason. And sometimes it's hard to tell the story, as I'm sure my colleagues on this site would agree. Sometimes it's hard to listen. And sometimes we just push the button. We don't listen to the news because we don't like it. But we have to tell the story. A very wise person, probably related to all of you, said, if we don't know history, history will indeed repeat itself. I would like to thank all of you for coming and all of you for telling your story and to continue to do as you have done. And that is the end for now.
Very beautiful. Wow. I knew this would be special when we virtually met and I looked up your history, but that little story that you just presented is so on point. And because it's recorded, there'll be so many more people who will have the benefit of seeing and hearing that story than what we have here today, though we have a very nice crowd. So thank you so much, Marilyn. I want to move quickly into the Q&A, and because I'm sure there are audience members who are raising their hand. I see Jackie, not surprisingly, is jumping in. But I want to let you know how to do this for me, is that in the bottom of your toolbar, you'll see there's a reaction icon there. I'm going to open that reaction icon and it says raise your hand. And if you look at my tile, you'll see how I have a hand raised. This way I can easily see you and I can call on you. And so if you have questions, just do that. I'm going to go to Jackie to start us. And I hope we have a nice Q&A session. So go for it, Jack.
Thank you for a very nice presentation today of your speakers. And Marilyn, if I may ask or beg, would you be a teacher? I am ready with my napkin, but I don't know how to fold it.
Oh no, it's all overlaps your hand like that. make a fist. Never hard to do.
Okay, here.
And it should be, hold on, my rabbit hopped away. Come back. Come back. Okay, goes like that. And what you're gonna do is put your fist in the middle of the napkin. See this here?
Yeah.
There. Okay, if you pull down on them, what you're gonna do is you're gonna take ear number 1 and you're gonna pull it up between these fingers.
I got it.
Okay, just keep pulling. If at first you don't succeed, whoa, see? I'm just doing that for you. So now you have one ear. Well done. And the other one will come the other way.
Okay.
Just keep trying. If at first you don't succeed, and you know what? If you send me a text or ask Jeffrey how to find me, I'll make you a video.
Oh, fantastic. I think, you know, for me, it's an educational tool. How can we take our kids of today, you know, we know all the story of Terezin and the input of the art and how people like Friedel Brandeis saved the life of children for at least monetary. How can we use that today to help us?
Kids, you know, I can say this for kids, for the kid that's in me, and the kids that kids can hear this stuff. They can hear it. They can hear it with a visual. Hearing, I'm a visual learner. I didn't really talk up in class till I was in 2nd grade, and the teacher didn't even know who I was because she'd never heard my voice. I haven't stopped talking since. But I find this medium easy. And I am sure that when I've done a bunch of research on toys in the camps, and they are finding a great deal of in the collections of what was made from stuff. And that's what I use. I use cartons and boxes and just all sorts of, I have about 100 plus YouTubes from a weekly show that I just stopped doing, that I did every week since the pandemic, that's on and my page as well. So anything's a puppet, forks, spoons, cups, and you use whatever around. That's it.
Thank you. And who else has a question for one of our presenters? Anybody else?
Here.
Okay, and I have Faith. Faith, it's nice to see you.
You too, sir.
Oh, we've communicated many times through email, so it's great to see you on screen. So thanks.
Thank you. We'll talk about your baking later.
What is your question?
Well, it's the reason I'm here is I am looking for a group of surviving wives or husbands of survivors that weren't in the Holocaust, but who lived with and listened to and helped them with their nightmares. And yet we don't have a medium place to speak. And I didn't know if anyone on this particular link here has anyone that we could collaborate together, because we have voices also. We survived through the survival talks of our partners. And I survived through 2, one from Shanghai and then one from the Holocaust. And that was 47 years worth of listening and now sharing. I've been sharing a lot about the Shanghai Jews and not the Shanghai Jews, the Jews of Shanghai. They weren't Shanghai people, except they lived there, not by choice. So that's...
I'll address your question. Not only do we have members here, but I would advocate, and you may already be a member of the Jewish Culture and Holocaust Remembrance Group on Facebook. We have nearly 4,000 members there. Many are 2Gs.
Okay.
And you are welcome to join. I'll make sure that you get accepted. And then you can actually address a post to the whole group and allow them to connect with you. Are you on Facebook?
I certainly am.
Okay, so then you can, they can direct message you, and you can create your own little Havara, which is, that sounds like what you're looking to do, which I think is terrific. And it's such a interesting place. I I don't have the benefit that you do because my parents never spoke ever. So, you know, I've been using this group to learn about what my parents' Holocaust journey was with other 2Gs who spoke. So yes, I think that's one option. Maybe there's someone on the group who has other suggestions for you.
All right. I also I'll propose a program to put on your show called Slow Boat from and to Shanghai.
Right. Well, we'll do that offline.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody have any suggestions for Faith in that regard for her? Okay. Anybody else who's interested in a question? And if there are no questions, well, you know, I'm not finished. I have more, so I'm going to go back and share my screen, and I'm going to do something literally different. I want everyone who's remaining to be on the program with me. There are two different paths that I'm going to take. One, I'm going to end the program. I want to let you know that on October 10th, we have the film festival. On October 22nd, we have our third annual Into the Light intergenerational survivor trauma program, which has been the largest audience each year that we present. And it's all about handling and managing intergenerational survivor trauma, which I've dealt with my entire life. There are many members in the group who faced the challenges as I do. Dr. Dana Schrager has been with me ever since we started 3 years ago presenting the program. And it is October 22nd at 1 o'clock, where we always present the time. And your time zone could be different than that. So you'll see notifications literally come out this week or next week regarding these two programs. But I also want you all to, if you can come on camera, we want to see you. It's such a difference in a black style. And I want all of you to mute yourself so that you're all of you can speak. And I'm going to do something that I've never done before. It could be a disaster, but we're going to try it. So here we go. I want you to sing along with the next video.
Can do that.
And I hope this works. So let me get.
I hope it's Havana Gila.
No, it's not. Also, most of you who know me, I have a huge passion for music and film. And so I'm trying to find where I have this because I have so many windows open here. So just give me a second.
You need a helper.
Yeah, I'm a one-man band. Here we go. It's time to sing. We all want to sing together. This is
Why can't we live together?
This is Steve Winwood.
That's what we need to know.
Carlos Santana. And I'm sure you all know the song.
together. Tell me why, oh, what can we live together? Everybody wants to live together. Why can't we live together? No more war, no more war, no more war. Just a little peace in this world. No more war, no more war. All we want is just a little peace in this world. Everybody wants to live together. Why can't we live together?
Easy. Louder. No matter what color, you are still my brother. Say no matter what color, oh, you are still my brother. Everybody wants to live together. Why can't we live together? Let me hear you call it. Tell me why, oh, why can't we live together? Tell me why, oh, why can't we live together? Everybody wants to live together. Why can't we live together? Can we live together? Live together. And then when you think about Rosh Hashanah coming just a few days from now, we need to figure out how to live together in this world. It's really something special. Now, we're going to end the program. I also want to thank you all. I know how important your time is and that you've chosen to, from all over the world, come together for this program. It'll be on YouTube, recorded and streaming by tomorrow. You also know that I place a video. I have a very large film catalog that I can use. So I've created at the end of the program, it actually ends, but you can, if you want to stay with me, you'll watch a 14-minute film, which is I handpicked from my catalog. And I think you'll enjoy it. It is really sends a message with virtually no words. So I think you all will enjoy it, and we'll come back briefly to talk about it if you want to. So hold on a second. Let me go find it.
Mute this.
Oops.
Departed or something.
Please mute yourself. Thank you.
Wer ist da? Hallo, hier ist Frau Handburger von oben drüber. Entschuldigen Sie, ich habe nur eine kurze Frage. Vielleicht können Sie mir kurz öffnen. Was wollen Sie? Entschuldigung, ich will Sie nicht stören. Es ist nur... Ich reise heute ab. Und ich weiß nicht, wie es mir passieren konnte, aber mir fehlt noch ein bisschen Geld. Der ist garantiert echt. Ein Erbstück meiner Großmutter. 10 Mark. Das ist alles, was ich noch brauche. Warten Sie. Der Ring. Nein. Gute Reise.
Sind Sie Frau Martha Handburger, Ehefrau von Jakob Handburger, Mutter von Sarah Handburger?
Ja, mein Mann und meine Tochter sind
Ausweis. Haben Sie die Wohnung gemäß den Ihnen mitgeteilten Vorschriften zum Verlassen hergerichtet?
Ja.
Sämtliche Gas- und Stromrechnungen bezahlt, sowie alle weiteren anfallenden Kosten beglichen?
Ja.
Die Haupthähne gesichert?
Ja.
Nachweise? Sie haben die 75 Reichsmark zu Ihrer Umsiedlung bei sich?
Mhm.
Dann begeben Sie sich bitte unverzüglich runter zum Sammelfahrzeug. Der Oberleutnant nimmt dort Gepäck und Schlüssel entgegen.
Sorry, hold on one second. So there's a movie with very little words, but the power of the presentation is enormous. So those who stuck with me for this little section, any comments on the movie? You can unmute yourself and speak up, or we can call it a day and enjoy our rest of our afternoon.
Is that from a true story?
I don't know the answer to that. The movie is called Departure.
That's what happened. I mean, that's really that's how it happened. Many, many, many times. You know, there was something, that was what happened. There was something I had wanted to say when I spoke. And that is, Germany was like a test case for the Nazis. You know, Hitler, from Mein Kampf alone, one knew that Hitler wanted to make Europe free of Jews. He called it Judenrein, clean of, you know, the vermin who were Jews. By 1941, 1942, there were virtually no Jews left in Germany. The early ones had immigrated. Then people were deported, they were killed. But what the Nazis, you can see, if you look, if you trace what the Nazis did in Germany, is that they learned by trial and error. They started out by telling people to immigrate. And they made it was not difficult in 1933, 1934 to immigrate. And those people who got out then were the lucky ones. But of course, very few people actually left them proportionally, because you had to be in, either you had to have no assets, which was a lot of young people, and that's basically how my parents left, or you had to have too many, you know, or you had to have just not too many assets, because if you had a lot, if you had a big stake, a profession, whatever it was, you were not going to leave, especially if you were an established person. So that didn't work. So not enough people left. So then they started with internal exile. You know, they passed the Nuremberg laws. They were Jews were pretty much isolated, and at that point, no one else would take them anymore. You know, they were stuck for the most part. There are very few countries that permitted immigration. Shanghai, of course, was a place that people who had no place else to go went, and some people were able to get out, but very few people. Yes, as you went on in the 1930s, fewer and fewer people could immigrate, and more people were being deported. By the late 1930s, they were being sent, as they always called it, to the East, to be executed or you know, enslaved in one way or another. Then in 1942 came the Wannsee Conference, which you know put into you know, implemented the final solution, which they put into effect throughout the rest of Europe. Remember, the war didn't start. I mean, the occupations really didn't start until around, you know, late 1939, 1940. The ghettoization of the Poles, for example, was immediate when they came in, because the Germans knew what they had to do. They had to get the Jews together, focusing on getting them together so they could deport them to various camps and just simply murder them, or use them for labor if they could. So Germany was, you know, by the time that all happened, there were no German Jews left, or virtually none. A few were in hiding, but there were virtually none. They were the first to go. And then, of course, as the Nazis occupied the rest of Europe, it happened in the other countries, but much faster, because they started going after the Jews immediately, to arrest them, to deport them, to get rid of them. So that was, I had wanted to say that at the end of my talk, and I didn't get to say that, but that was something that became very clear to me in the course of my researches, that you know, the German Jews were sort of the first experiment. How do you clear a country of Jews? How do you clear a place of Jews? And they did it. You know, they did it. Now, of course, Germany has bent over backwards in many ways to make amends. I mean, this film is a German film, and it is obviously an effort, one of many, many, many efforts to do so. And they were prime contributors to Israel. They're a great friend of Israel. And the Jews who are now in Germany, and they're getting an increasing Jewish population mainly came from Eastern Europe. There are very few of the original German Jews left, and there are a lot of young people. And Israelis are going to, Israelis with the problems that are going on now in Israel. Young Israelis are going to Germany to live. They're going to, which is, of course, an irony. But it was
let me stop you. Thank you for that.
Yeah. It's just that I wanted to,
Rosa, you have your hand up. Are you interested in asking a question?
Yes, I was just going to say how powerful the 10 francs were, such a simple thing, but that made such a difference, and it makes you wonder how many more there were. That it's a question of luck in a way, because either you have such a little thing in a way or you don't. And what a difference it made.
Where are you listening from?
Malta.
Malta?
Yes. And I hope it's okay for me to be here because I'm not Jewish. My great-grandma was. And I also feel a sense of responsibility because, as some of you may know, Malta was nearly surrendered during the war. And I have always felt, why the Italian Jews and not us? Why were we spared? So I feel a sense of responsibility to keep passing the message and
Rosa,
to listen.
You're always welcome.
Thank you.
Don't ever think a minute that you're not welcome in our group, and I would encourage you to join the Facebook group.
Yeah, that's how I heard of this when I saw your post yesterday in one of the Facebook groups.
Okay, we'll come to the Jewish Culture and Holocaust Remembrance Group. I will admit you, and I think you'll enjoy the conversation. And it's all about Jewish. It's not just about Holocaust. And we tend
No, I appreciate it because my great-grandma, she has the same health issues that I now have. So even though she died before I was born, shortly before I was born, I feel a sense of connection to her. So I would like to know more. Thank you.
Well, we're happy to have you. And I want to say hello to Thomas. Thomas, it seems that you may be new to our programming, so I thank you for spending time with us. And
thank you.
Diana, I know your mom was with us earlier, and it's nice to see you on screen. And normally you have a black tile. So I'm so happy that you put your camera on so we get to see who you are and to meet you virtually. So Jackie, you have your hand raised. So
very, very fast. I think you mentioned a few times that it's a movie with little words, and I thought it was very interesting that the family name was Hamburger to illustrate what Joan is saying regarding Germany. I thought that was a very powerful point.
I also
what do I know?
I also thought it was very interesting that she knew who was knocking on the door, but she required herself to put lipstick on, which is to me unfathomable, to be able to make sure that you're pretty to be deported. So
they didn't know where they were going. I mean, not much word got back to Germany. It was all rumor, and people knew that they were being asked to go somewhere, but they really didn't know. For the most part, they didn't know where they were going, and they were hoping they were going to some kind of a workplace or someplace they could live in peace. I mean, there were of course dread as to where they were going, but people just, they were being deported. That's all they knew. They had to leave.
So I wanted to ask Mark.
She's afraid.
So I'm glad that you just popped in on the video. And Amato, please, if you can unmute yourself, Mark, unmute yourself, join the video. I want to introduce myself to you, say hello, and perhaps you have a question why Devorah asks her question. So nice to see you, Devorah. Devorah is a Holocaust survivor, as well as Jackie, and Ruth Lindemann, Diana Lindemann. Ruth is Ruth's daughter, and Ruth is a longtime person who comes to all of our programs, who was here earlier, and she's a survivor as well. So please, Devorah, ask your question.
Okay, it's not exactly a question, it's a comment about lipstick. My survivor cousin, Gerta Schlesserova, who survived 2 times in Auschwitz, On the second time, no, excuse me, the first time when she didn't know where she was going, she believed she was going to see her husband, and she didn't have lipstick. He had gone on a train with men. She was going on a train with women. She pricked her finger, made blood, put lipstick on her lips to be pretty for her husband. And she believes that that was what sent her to selection to the survivor side, when her husband was sent to the not survivor side.
Interesting. And Thomas, you have your hand raised?
Yes, thank you. I'm so grateful to take part in this, and good night, everyone. I hope I can come back later and take part in more.
We have one of these every month. We have one on usually the third Sunday at 1 o'clock Eastern time in the US. Where are you? It sounds like you have a German accent. Is that true?
No, I'm actually in Sweden, in the north of Sweden.
Okay, nice.
Yes, thank you.
And
thank you.
Happy that you're here with us, and I would love to hear more. If you can drop me a line, you know my email address is, we're on Facebook.
Yes. I'm planning to do a comment about when Hitler bought steel from Sweden and paid with Jewish gold. And that broke my heart completely, because all of that gold was shipped to the melter where I work. And I cried for hours when I found out what happened.
Yes.
So I'm going to do a comment on Facebook.
Please, and I would love to. I'd love to. I have a series called the Obligations of Memory series, where I speak to people about their experiences, and I invite all of you to join and for an application for me to interview you, and it streams on all of our digital platforms. Mark and Yale, if I guess you're not going, I have a 3:30. I always have a dead stop. I don't want to use the word dead. I shouldn't use the word dead, but I always have a stop. So thank you for staying with us the entire time. It's so great to see you. You're all my friends, and I wish you a good afternoon if you're here on the East Coast, and if it's a good morning on the West Coast, and it's evening for you in Europe.
Yes.
So thank you very much. And Faith, if you have
Laila Tov.
Yes, nice. And Shana Tov, and have a happy New Year.
All of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.